Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6:30, so we'll go ahead and call our council members to the dais. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for, except for Councilman Dorito, who will not be with us this evening. And as always, we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us. So the first item up on our agenda this evening is the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of the council work session minutes from the meeting of March 20th, 2023. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Do we have any public comment cards on that item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Motion to approve.
Second. Have a motion by Councilman Heights and a second by Councilman Will, probably only because it was that much closer that I heard it first. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the consent agenda, and we'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. The public hearing item that leads the public hearing is Z-23-01/V-23-03 KG Luxury Homes, 1580 Mayfield Road. Mr. Woodman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The applicant has requested to come before Mayor and Council to ask a question before we begin the public hearing.
Is Council amenable to that? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Underwood.
members of City Council. Ethan Underwood with Miles Hansford Talent. We represent KJ Luxury Homes, and I will start by this request by saying we're going to do whatever you tell us to do. But what we have been working on as recently as 5/15 and have actually been getting signed is an agreement with neighbors. We've spent the last 60 days working with the folks at Harrington Falls and with Gransley to get them comfortable with a reduced number of lots and more restrictive zoning conditions. We're not asking to change staff conditions, we're asking to make them more restrictive. We understand that because we were literally working up to the deadline, staff's not had time to review it. They would like more time to review it. We're comfortable with that. What we're hopeful that you all would be willing to do is, rather than kicking it back to Planning Commission, that you would allow us to come back to you next month, have the final decision. We're not planning on changing anything because we finally got it in writing with our neighbors. But again, that's up to you all. We would ask to not have to go back to Planning Commission just because it would take so much more time. We think we've accomplished everything that needs to be done, but again, that's up to you, and we will defer to your judgment on it. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to defer it for 30 days, but in that deferment time period, I think staff will reevaluate what was originally proposed, what Planning Commission saw, and at that point in time, I think staff has the ability to negate that deferral, if you will, time frame, if it's deemed that you need to go back to Planning Commission. Okay, I would be comfortable with that.
Is the rest of council fine with that? Councilman Will, of course.
So it did not pass a Planning Commission. Is there any chance the changes you made, would that make it more willing for them to pass it in your opinion, or do you not think that those changes would be affected?
I can't speak for the neighbors. My experience has been when I walk in holding hands with the neighbors and we all say we agree, we usually get a little better result from the Planning Commission. But it's taken us that extra time, and I think we're there now. But I don't know whether we would accomplish more. We didn't get a recommendation of denial from Planning Commission, but we didn't get any recommendation from them. So I think it's a question of what do you all
And
feel
is
like you need
your
to have.
request not to go back to them from a timing perspective, or you just don't want to go back before them?
Solely from a timing perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Binder?
Mr. Tracy, to help me better understand from what I did my preliminary review of our charter, which is always dangerous, so it's better to ask you. It was at our development director's discretion to be able to put a case before us without a decision from Planning Commission is kind of what I read, right? So it was her
Right.
her
Your
decision.
code requires a hearing before the planning commission prior to coming before you, and it says that the planning commission may make recommendations, but there's no mandatory requirement that a recommendation have been made before it comes to you all.
So since it's our director, it was our director's decision, I'm fine with leaving it in her hands, her capable hands there. If she feels that it's changed so much that it's worth Planning Commission. I was originally concerned, or just wanted to make sure when I spoke to the attorneys to say, hey, I want to make sure everybody's on the record that they feel that this is due process if we miss Planning Commission. So I'm okay with our director and the applicant working that out to see what they think is fair.
Councilman Mitchell?
Just a comment. After reading some of the comments from the neighbors in both Harrington Falls and Gransley, I feel better knowing that you have an agreement with them, and I'm personally fine waiting until up to 30 days for you to bring it back before us at our director's discretion. Thank you.
If we don't have any other questions, then I'll call for a motion.
I would call for a motion to postpone or defer, whichever term you wish to use.
Ms. Tracy, which term would you prefer?
I think you're postponing it for a minimum of 30 days.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
Not to put words in your mouth. Yes.
No worries, yes. So my motion tonight is to postpone for a minimum of 30 days and leave the discretion whether to go to Planning Commission or not to the director.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, second by Councilman Mitchell, and that was to postpone as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you. We'll see you later. With that item having been deferred, we'll move on to the second item under the public hearing portion of tonight's agenda, and that is PH-23-01, Unified Development Code, Text Amendment, Crabapple Overlay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Director Cook.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The next item before you is consideration of text amendments to the Unified Development Code, Article 2, to add Section 2.11 Crabapple Overlay. Approximately 9 acres of land in the Crabapple area is located in Alpharetta, with the remaining area located in the city of Milton. Through different planning efforts Milton has established, and they've been implementing their vision for Crabapple, we want to make sure that whatever development comes forward in the acreage that's within the city of Alpharetta is consistent with what the city of Milton has put in place. So in preparing the overlay, we looked at several different designs. They have a form-based code. We also looked at GDOT's plans because they do have plans to widen sidewalks in downtown Crabapple. So we made sure that everything that we're recommending is consistent. What we didn't do is change any allowed uses. So the zoning designation, which is OP and SU for the 9 acres, we're not recommending any changes to add to what's already allowed within OP and SU. And I don't know if it's easier to look on, or if I've got copies, if that's easier, if you want me to hand it out to go over it quickly. We brought some extra copies, but.
Okay. Might be helpful if there are questions.
Yeah, they're right there. In front of you. So site regulations were established, and when he hands that out, that's on page 2. And the site regulations are to make sure that when development comes in within the OP, if they came in to build a new office building, that they build the office building close to the street and that parking is required behind the building. So right now, we don't have regulations along Crabapple Road that would require that. So looking at page 2, the site regulation table, that is setting up standards for what we call Type A and Type B corridors. Type A is Crabapple Road. So you'll see that we established a wider sidewalk along Crabapple Road, and then for Type B, which is depicted also on page 3, we have a smaller sidewalk, which is 5 foot in width. And the 5 foot width is something that we just copied what was the code for Crabapple to make sure it's consistent. We also, if you look on page 8, we have streets, the requirements for who this applies to, and this applies to new development within the Crabapple area. Also, existing developed sites when more than 25% of the site area is disturbed. Also, C, existing principal buildings that are expanded, except as provided for in 2 immediately. And it also has D, existing principal buildings that are renovated or repaired, and the value of said work exceeds 50% of the building's replacement cost. And this is something that we just took from other parts of the code to make sure that we're consistent. We also put streetscape requirements as well as planters and how you plant trees and the distance required for the trees and the number of trees. And then on page 9, you'll see parking and loading. We wanted to make sure that we continued the parking code that we have for downtown Alpharetta. So this is very similar to what we have for downtown Alpharetta, to require the on-street parking spaces as well as the streetscape. And then on page 10, it has the landscape and screening requirements. Again, this is something that we took from our downtown overlay. We're just continuing that to make sure that Milton has a similar design. And then lastly, skipping to page 12, we put in building design. So right now, they're not specific architectural styles required within the 9 acres if they're redeveloped. These are styles that we took from the downtown overlay. They don't include all of the styles that you could build within Alpharetta's downtown, but we did talk to Milton, looked at their code, and made sure that we put appropriate styles that would complement their styles. And the remainder is architecture, and then we skip to the last page, page 16. We also put street furniture requirements. We looked at the street furniture that was adopted by the city of Milton, and we just specified that they use the same benches as well as lighting. And that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, this was also considered, of course, at the Planning Commission meeting. We did have one person that was present that owns the daycare and was concerned that they were going to be required to implement some of these standards in the on-street parking. So again, it doesn't apply if there are no changes to the existing site. But I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Councilman Mitchell.
Director Cook, I had promised my friend Mayor Jamison that we would allow dollar stores and tattoo parlors. Does this include that?
No, that didn't make it in. So.
Okay, all right. Well,
but you could certainly put that as a condition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Hypes.
I'm aware of some proposed uses that have been, trial balloons have been floated, and some of them involve building heights out there. And in here it says, shall not exceed 3 stories or 40 feet.
Correct.
That would be the shorter of those two, right? So you couldn't have 3 stories, it's 45 feet, right?
Right. It's a maximum of 40 feet.
Okay. Or a maximum of 3 stories.
It's
That what it
3
says?
stories,
That's not what it
or
says,
I see what you're saying with the.
So we may want to tweak that just so
Sure.
if we're the author of the document that we're telling folks what we expect.
Right.
Any other questions? Councilman Binder.
As far as Milton's end, because we've had that one lot of land that's come up a couple times for a hotel. What are they doing with applied uses or I know we're not tweaking ours.
Right, so they have a form-based code which allows most uses by right as long as it's built to a certain form. So they do allow rental, they do allow hotel by right on most of the property, but our code, I mean, most of the rest of downtown Crabapple, but our code with the OP zoning does not allow those uses by right.
Might be interesting later on just to see if we can apply some of the codes. I know that rely to our downtown overlay, or if it's worth doing that, or just leave it as is for what we have right now. Like the live work, some of the things that we've seen downtown that
Right.
that have worked for us.
And we could certainly look at changes to our comprehensive land use plan that show different zoning categories that they could request that are, the DTMU zoning categories that you would typically see in downtown Alpharetta.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilman Will.
So my understanding is that this piece of land we're talking about is completely inside Milton, not inside Alpharetta's city limits, so to speak. Is that correct?
This is property within the city of Alpharetta. So it's 9 acres within the city of Alpharetta, and it should show it on the last page.
Yeah, it was confusing to me because it looked like it was outside of our city. And the codes and regulations we're putting in place, are they any different than Milton's for the Crabapple area?
It's not as, the allowances are not the same. There are more allowances, different uses that are allowed within the city of Milton, within Crabapple, that aren't allowed within our code.
Does that present any kind of challenge in the cohesiveness of?
Well, they could certainly request a rezoning. Right now, the property is zoned OP and SU, so OP uses are limited to office, daycare. You can actually have a restaurant use. You can't have a drive-through restaurant. So it's limited to not allow residential. So within our downtown, we usually require, if you're requesting a residential use, that you come forward and have to go through that zoning process. We also, when we created our overlay for downtown Alpharetta, we didn't rezone it by right. So to me, this is very similar to what we did with our downtown, where you still had to come forward and request a rezoning for consideration. It puts in place different architecture that we're going to require. It also puts in place what we're going to be looking for as far as the form to make sure that buildings are close to the street instead of parking.
And this is where our old courthouse was?
That's one of the properties.
So just to re-clarify my first question, is this an island of the city of Alpharetta?
Yes,
Inside
it is the island of the city of Alpharetta.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you had asked me if it was in the city of Milton.
No, the reason behind my question is if we've got this little island sitting over in Milton that's kind of outside of our normal boundaries and we're trying to put different regulations in for architecture, et cetera, it seems like we're doing something that's odd to me.
Well, this was in coordination and at the request also of City of Milton. So they've reviewed it. We made sure that we reviewed their current codes and incorporated what we felt we could support that was very similar to the type of overlay that we have for our downtown. Our overlay does not require other uses by right. You have to go through a public hearing, and we put this together in a similar fashion.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director Cook. Ms. Tracy, do you mind reading this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance by the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend Article 2 of the Unified Development Code of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to add regulations pertaining to the Crabapple overlay, to repeal conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak, now is your opportunity. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion this evening to adopt PH-23-01 Unified Development Code Text Amendments, Crabapple Overlay District, as presented this evening, with one change to the reference of height, where it will say be changed to maximum of 3 stories, not to exceed 40 feet.
Second. And I will not be accepting any friendly amendments from Councilmember Mitchell.
There you go.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and second by Councilman Binder. And that was for PH-23-01, UDC text amendment changes as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? And to the point I think Councilman was bringing is we're good neighbors, we're good partners with the city of Milton. It is an unusual circumstance because the city of Alpharetta owned property that was outside our proper city limits prior to the existence of the city of Milton. And so while we are good neighbors, we wanted to work with them to give them some comfort level that while it is city of Alpharetta territory and residents and property owners, we want to be consistent with what they're achieving in their downtown. So that was the whole reason that this was brought forward, and hopefully this will be supported by Mayor Jameson and his council. But we'll continue to work with them. All that being said, all those in favor of the motion to approve, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. Next item up is E-23-01, Peachtree Immediate Care Sign Exception. Mr. Woodman, you once again have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The next item before you is a sign exception for Peachtree Immediate Care. The applicant is requesting to allow an additional wall sign for a total of 2 wall signs. They're proposing to aggregate the total allowable sign area and spread it over 2 signs on the northeast and southeast building elevations. And this property is located at 870 North Main Street, near the northwest corner of North Main Street in Windward Parkway. This is the former IHOP. This applicant was before you a few months back for a conditional use to allow an urgent care at this location. So do have a board over here to the left. The applicant is asking for 2 wall signs. So this is the property here, North Main Street and Windward Parkway. The urgent care sign here would face Main Street, so it would be on this elevation of the building. The property sits in a hole from North Main Street, so it sits down several feet. GDOT's recently constructed the wall along their frontage as well. And when this property, since it did sit down low from the road, when the property was constructed, they built the building at this location here, and they put all the parking on the side of the building. So with the parking on the side of the building, the entrance was on this northeast side of the building. So that's why they're asking for the second wall sign, to allow their customers to identify that entrance. So that is what you see here, the Peachtree Immediate Care sign that would be over their entrance. So this is the side of the building that faces their side parking lot. City's code allows 1 wall sign, so 1 per road frontage. So they have 1 road frontage on North Main Street. They are allowed up to a 65 square foot sign. This urgent care sign that they're showing facing Main Street has a size of, it's just under 43 square feet, so it's less than the total 65 square feet that is allowed. So the applicant is requesting the sign variance or exception to allow for an additional wall sign, the Peachtree Immediate Care sign, and that sign is just under 21 square feet. So the total of the 2 signs is under the 65 square feet total that is allowed facing Main Street. This is very similar to, you may recall, the Wellstar on Old Milton Parkway. They had a similar request several months back. Of course, staff looked at this request against the established review criteria, we did not believe that it would have significant impacts on surrounding properties. The surrounding properties are developed with commercial uses. The property does have some hardships. As I mentioned, it does sit below grade, and that building entrance is not oriented to the street and is oriented to the side of the building. This property is in the Highway 9 LCI, which is also, we have the Windward LCI that we were just granted grant funds from ARC, and we are kicking that off. We just recently kicked off the Windward LCI. That's the same thing as the Highway 9 LCI. And that Highway 9 LCI is not codified. It's not in our code, but it does say the vision of that plan does refer to the Alpharetta portion of the Highway 9 LCI, that it should follow the design standards in our downtown. And so we do have more specific requirements for signage in the downtown. And so as part of our recommendation, we have asked the applicant to comply with our downtown regulations for signage, which do not allow face-lit signs. So they require either external illumination or halo-lit signs. So that is part of our recommendation. The applicant did submit their citizen participation report, and they did not receive any comments. We did show this to the public at the February 8th Community Zoning Information Meeting, and there were no public comments at that meeting. So staff is recommending approval, subject to 2 conditions. Condition 1, wall sign location, number, and size shall be limited to the submitted plans dated 12/23/22, except to comply with the conditions below as approved by staff. Condition 2, wall signs shall not have an internally illuminated sign face. Wall signs shall be reverse lit, externally illuminated, or non-illuminated as approved by staff. Wall signs shall comply with sign regulations applicable in the downtown overlay. And that concludes the presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Woodman on this item? Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you. Has there been any discussion about how large the urgent care letters are in red?
So we did not have a discussion with the applicant about the size of the urgent care sign because it was less than what was allowed. We did have a discussion with them about the red color of the lettering. The applicant is here. We did point to the Wellstar approval. So on Wellstar sign, they did use white lettering. When they were before council, they used white lettering with a red outline around the lettering. The difference was we did approach the applicant with that information and provided a copy of what that sign looked like. The difference was that the Wellstar building was done in a brown brick and this building is white. So that white signage, they felt like that wouldn't show up very well. But yes, we did have a discussion with them about the color of the lettering.
It's just that's going to stick out like a sore thumb on Highway 9. And even at 43 square foot, it's huge. That's huge for red letters.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Binder.
I may have missed this. Is this open 24 hours as a urgent care or immediate care?
I don't remember what the hours of operation were on the conditional use. I don't think that it was 24 hours.
Okay.
Thank you.
And maybe good when we, because if we have the signage, just making sure somehow that it's, if somebody's looking for emergency care, it's after hours, just so they're not swerving into the that place, and they should be looking for emergency care.
The signs as
the hospital.
proposed by the applicant here are reverse lit, so they will be illuminated, but they will not be illuminated through the face of the sign. So the illumination will be on the back of the building, kind of creating a halo effect around the signage. So it'll still be visible.
Pretty sure, yeah, it was discussed when Wellstar came too, like, hey, you're saying it's urgent care, make sure everyone knows, so.
Yeah.
Easy, okay.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Woodman. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening. I'm Kim Wakefield. I'm here on behalf of Peachtree and Commercial Signs, and I have Mr. Tim Kiss with me, and so that in case he needs to make some decisions that are above my pay grade. Mr. Woodman pretty much covered all the issues. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the site and the wall that's been put up and the fact that it sits below and the trees kind of block the view of the front of the building. We do have the red letters on the front for a reason to be, I mean, it's an urgent care. People have got to be able to find us, and white letters, as he said, against the white background just are basically useless. Not only do people in need of urgent care need to find it, but if somebody was to come in and they needed to get an ambulance there, you know, we're talking about they need to find it. We did change the lettering to the halo. When we first submitted, we had face lit, internally illuminated signs, and we did change that based on recommendation to be halo lit. So the letter, the red face, won't be lit up. It'll just be around the letter, so it'll be pushing back on the building. And we need strong visibility being an urgent care. I could go back over all the other issues that he went over, but I don't think y'all need me to do that, that we're within the square footage. And, you know, we could technically put a sign up there without a variance. So we're just asking to be able to allow to split it and put one over our entrance. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think everyone said it pretty well. Our issue is we are an alternative to the ER that is 1/7 the price. We see patients faster. Not trying to say that we're as valuable as a hospital by any means, but our challenge here is visibility. Our concern is that patients who are injured, who are coming to us, who are in a bad state of mind, are not going to be able to find our center with the challenges that we have from the location of the center, and so I think that's really all we can say.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Councilman Mitchell.
Listen, I want you all in there. I was glad to get this as away from being an unfurnished IHOP. So, but even the hospital's emergency signs, they set back further from the road than you all do, and their signs are not as big as that. If I'm trying to get to a yes vote, even if it were blue letters, it would be less. Right across the street, and here's an example of what I mean. They have a furniture store, and then a new nail salon went in with a fuchsia sign that was rear lit. It sticks out like a sore thumb at night, and even during the day, it's not even half this size. Even the hospital size is not half of what the 43 square foot.
Yeah, I mean, we are certainly willing to try to figure out something that works for this. We're not trying to stick out like a sore thumb. We typically, we've always done, and honestly, the industry has always done urgent care in red or white on top of red.
Right.
You know, some of the other options could be a smaller sign, a sign that is white on red or something along those lines. So we're completely open to that. We could do something like a blue sign, but the only problem is it doesn't have that visibility that a red sign has. You know, it's just like when you see an emergency room sign; they're always red.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we can show the example of the white outline on there. It's just the visibility is so poor, and if we had a brick facade, we would certainly do it. There's no doubt. It's just.
And that one is white with the red channeling?
That's with the red outline, just yeah. Like, because when we thought about that immediately when Michael had mentioned that, we said, oh, that would be great. Unfortunately,
yeah, it's just not going to show up.
It just doesn't do that. And we could paint the area behind that red, but I don't think you necessarily want that either. I can show you a picture of it, because we looked at a couple of other scenarios.
Our staff even tries to get the gasoline stations to minimize the striping on their canopies, you know, because it does stick out like crazy. So thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Ms. Tracy, Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards? We do not, Mr. Mayor. However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this item, now's your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to approve request for E-23-01 Peachtree Immediate Care sign exception.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and a second by Councilman Binder. That was to approve E-23-01 Peachtree Immediate Care sign exception as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I just point out that I know some people have issues with red, but Chick-fil-A has red signs. And they're kind of an emergency at times too, so. I'm fine with this. I think it represents what it is, and I think that's fair. And I understand some people have issues with size of signs, and the city does a really good job of it. You know, there are a few, as Councilman Mitchell pointed out, that get a fuchsia color or something sneaks through, but for the most part, you drive through this town, and I think what you see is well thought out, so I think this will fall in line as well.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? Please raise your right hand. And it passes 4-2. Mr. Chair, did you pass these? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next item up, the PH-23-04 South Main Street Building Center Initiative.
Thank you, Mayor. This is consideration of adoption of the South Main Street Livable Center Initiative. The Atlanta Regional Commission's Livable Centers Initiative is a program that incentivizes local jurisdictions to re-envision their communities as vibrant, walkable places that offer increased mobility options, encourage healthy lifestyles, and provide improved access to jobs and services. And just a reminder, ARC awarded the city $160,000 to complete the study, and then there was a 20% match. So we had a $40,000 match for the study. The LCI study kicked off in March of 2022 and reached conclusion just this past December. We did have a steering committee. We had it consisted of property owners, residents, and business owners to help guide the process. We also had several different public meetings. We had 3 different public meetings, as well as offering input, of course, online for the study. And Eric Bosman is here tonight to present the study to you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all again. So there are some slides in your packet that I will sort of refer to as we go through the presentation. Obviously won't point to those this evening, but we'll give you just a little bit of a guide as I hit the high points of this. You know, as Ms. Cook alluded to, the downtown plan in 2014 sort of looked at this South Main Street area and almost sort of put a bookmark on it as, you know, let's get downtown figured out first, and then South Main will be determined in the future, and so the future is now. And as with most of your sub-area plans, the intent for this effort was to work with the community to create a community-based vision for this corridor, to identify some transportation investments that could make the area more walkable and more livable, significantly in this corridor building off of some of the capacity enhancements that GDOT is constructing along the corridor, and how do we address some of those things that are left and humanize them a little bit when the Department of Transportation is done, to look at opportunities to create placemaking and art enhancements, and to identify key redevelopment sites and opportunities and a vision for what those may become in the future. So as we talk about the South Main Street corridor, just so that folks can somewhat visualize it, the South Main corridor goes from Hembree on the west at the city of Alpharetta limits, which is at the United BMW, up to the old Milton Parkway intersection right where Wills Park begins on the southwest corner. And one of the pretty remarkable geographic pieces of this corridor is sort of the jagged nature of the city limits between the city of Alpharetta and city of Roswell. While most of the study areas within the city of Alpharetta we would be remiss if we didn't point out the Fulton County School site that is on the south side of the corridor that is within the city of Roswell. And so we will reference that as we talk about some of the strategies for the plan. Ms. Cook covered the process, so I'm going to jump into recommendations. The recommendations on your packet start on slide number 6, and pages 6 through 10 talk about the near-term strategies. So with public input and the steering committee's help in this process, we outline the recommendations in 3 different phases. A near-term, so think of that as sort of years 1 to 3, a midterm, years sort of 3 to 7, and long-term, probably years 7 to hopefully 10, sometimes 12. And so the near-term strategies are really 4. The first one is to make additional corridor enhancements to State Route 9. Build off of what the Department of Transportation has recently done, but come back in and add those humanistic elements. So street trees, lighting, median plantings, and landscaping enhancements to the retaining walls, which are now a pretty significant physical feature on this part of the corridor. We think one of the ways to soften those up is to plant some creeping growing vines on the back side of those walls and let them then creep over the front. That is the minimum that we can do in terms of what would create any sort of maintenance or operational conflict. We're not changing the wall themselves, so GDOT can continue to own the wall. We don't have to absorb any structural issues from that, but allowing the vines to sort of creep over could be a great opportunity to soften that and integrate the corridor back into the look and the feel of what you've done in Alpharetta. Strategy number 2 in the near term is to reclaim some of the right-of-way remnants. When GDOT acquired the right-of-way that they needed for the corridor capacity enhancement, we identified no less than 5 areas along the corridor where there's going to be some leftover space. And those leftover spaces are large enough to be sort of little pocket parks, opportunities for art installations. One of the things the public is very excited about is creating a brand for this corridor. So it sort of has lacked that identity, and there's an opportunity to build on that, whether you do it through these little landscaping of pocket parks or create a public art program that then occupies these right-of-way remnants. There's an opportunity to create a theme and a look and some consistency along the corridor. The third near-term strategy is to really create connectivity to Wills Park. One of the greatest assets in this corridor that has no connectivity to the South Main corridor whatsoever is Wills Park, your signature Central Park. And for residents that know it's there, you can kind of perceive it, but for the most part, we have sort of our commercial, auto-oriented businesses that block you from the park. We think not only at the Wills Road intersection, but also through a couple of properties, there may be a way to work with property owners to create a green ribbon and then a signage or placard or a piece of public art that both brings the park to South Main Street and also alerts folks on South Main Street that the park, the most significant asset, is nearby, and integrate that into the corridor rather than something that's hidden in the backyards of many of our businesses. And then, as I mentioned, the fourth theme is really to create a corridor brand for the future. There are some ideas in the plan that were offered by our steering committee and by the public. We did not get as far as deciding on what that brand should be. We'll leave that pretty healthy debate to you, but we recommend that really a branding consultant should be brought on, or at the very least, the city work with this community to identify which of those brands or a modification of those brands might be appropriate for the area in the future. And as always, would encourage you to do some healthy Googling as part of that. We have found in the last couple of months since we finished this that one of our offered ideas is also a cosmetics brand, so maybe not what you want to go with for the South Main corridor. In addition to those near-term strategies, there's a short set of midterm strategies. Working on the corridor enhancements and the pocket park, reclaiming those remnants, probably goes from the near term into the midterm. The 3 other midterm strategies are, I think my slide actually says a facade grant program. I want to revise that. That really should be a frontage grant program. And the reason we use the word frontage instead of facade is there are some things that could be done to improve some of the buildings, but it's really about reshaping everything from the front of those buildings out to the street, because so much of this area along South Main really was built during the automobile age. And there are a lot of small parcels. So Many of these parcels are going to age and need some time before they're ready to redevelop, or someone's going to need to assemble some of these parcels. So I would encourage you to increase that definition to a frontage grant where not only the facades or awnings or colors, but also what can we do to soften up some of those front parking lots with additional landscaping, with some additional color? Can they embrace some of the art and the brand ideas? Some folks may want to improve the facades, but there's more to be done along the corridor than just the facades themselves. Two other midterm strategies. One is a Maxwell Road extension. I want to be as clear as I can be. This is not a requirement by any mean to reroute Maxwell Road. It's sort of an opportunistic idea. The shape of the properties on the south side of Main Street are pretty difficult in terms of folks being able to reinvest and redevelop those properties because of the odd shape of Maxwell Road. If someone were to assemble some of those properties on the South Main, that might create the opportunity to partner to then straighten out Maxwell Road and bring it into the middle of the South Main corridor rather than sort of the awkward intersection that's going to be left behind from the GDOT improvement. You could certainly live with where Maxwell Road is today, and you could work with it, but we really wanted to put this on the radar so that in the future, if redevelopment opportunities do come forward, that there is a thought about fixing sort of that alignment of Maxwell Road. And then the last piece, the redevelopment guidelines in the midterm, are really taking some of the lessons that you've learned in downtown and extending those appropriately along South Main related to architectural character and reinvestment for those that do redevelop and need to do so in a way that maintains the aesthetic and the character of Alpharetta. We're not looking to repeat what is downtown. It's really building off of downtown with a little more of a contemporary mercantile feel rather than the more traditional feel of downtown. The last section, which gets you into pages 12 through 16, are the long-term strategies. The long-term strategies go over the opportunities for 4 areas that may be apt to redevelop in the years to come. The first section is South Main Central. It's really thinking about many of those auto-oriented businesses and storage facilities in the middle of the corridor. What might those become in 5, 10, 15 years? The bottom line for South Main Central is there really is an opportunity if some of those properties are assembled to really create a there in the middle of the corridor and embrace not only the middle of South Main Street, but that gateway into Wills Park. So there's some bigger ideas and thoughts about that South Main Central and how we open it up, embrace the park, and reshape the center of the corridor. Of course, on the opposite side of the street is the Fulton County Board of Education property. We look at that professionally and say, wow, that's a pretty underutilized piece of property. Each time we've gone by to look at it, it's used as the bus holding facility right now, but it's a very large parcel of land. While we have not been able to affirm this with the Fulton County Board of Education, despite our best efforts to reach folks at the school system, it makes sense that at least the north portion of this property has a higher and better use than parking buses on it today. And if we really want South Main to realize its potential, it needs to be a 2-sided street, not a 1-sided street. So that's where we are with South Main Central. The second long-range area is the cottage commercial. We're recognizing that there are some old homes that are on this corridor today on the south side. That's the area that sort of shows up in the plan, but a little bit to the east, there's also a collection of older 1980s, 1990s office condos as well. Frankly, either of those properties could latch onto this concept of how do we create an area for some small-scale office and retail that has a little bit of a different character to it in the future. So the cottage commercial opportunity outlines a way to capture that unique character, whether it's replacing or repositioning some of those buildings in sort of a cottage-style building standpoint that could provide a different niche within Alpharetta that really doesn't exist today. The third long-term area is the Grove. This is really building off of the community center and the gateway to Wills Park, enhancing the Alpha Loop and making sure that we have a clear connection for the Alpha Loop, as well as retaining and enhancing that green space on the south side of the community center and knitting that back to downtown, creating a clearer connection between downtown and Wills Park. And then the fourth long-term area is the Alpha Park neighborhood. We've really looked at a variety of strategies to help preserve that neighborhood character, but also provide an opportunity for folks who want to be able to reinvest in their homes within that neighborhood without losing that character and that style of housing. So there are some thoughts and ideas about the potential to do a pilot program that allows accessory dwelling units in the Alpha Park neighborhood. Right now, the code limits what folks can do. Like a carriage house is not legal by code in Alpha Park right now. It has to be attached to the primary dwelling unit. And there may be an opportunity to look at and pilot some more unique strategies in Alpha Park that allow folks to reinvest in that neighborhood without necessarily having to tear down and build from scratch, which, as you all know from several in-town neighborhoods, often creates some challenges in terms of scale and massing and character. Again, that's the second part of this plan where we had some really healthy, vibrant community conversations. Some follow-up work needs to be had to work with the residents and the neighbors in Alpha Park to really find the sweet spot of what folks are comfortable with, but also allow them to retain their investments and invest in their properties. The last 3 pages, 17 through 19, outlines the action plan. The 100-day action plan, which includes adopting this plan and incorporating it into the comprehensive plan so that it becomes the policy document for the South Main Corridor, and then also the outline of the 5-year action plan related to transportation enhancements and 5-year action plan related to development and land use policies and initiatives are also included so that staff can track our progress and our success in implementing the plan over the years to come. So that will conclude my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Hypes?
I can't remember if we workshopped this item or not. It feels a little bit like a workshop, but it's up for a vote. So it's sort of an omnibus, here's everything, we're going to vote on it. Having said that, a couple of comments, observations, questions. I read in here about the branding. Is there any decision been made on branding? When we vote tonight, are we voting for a branding direction?
No, there are some ideas that came from the public in terms of some initial thoughts of what the brand might be, but through this process, we did not settle on one of those brands. I will just offer an opinion that it felt like as we got towards the end of this process that the South of Wills idea had some momentum, but I would encourage some additional community conversations around where the community wants to go with that. That's a pretty important decision, and it needs to lead, I would suggest, pretty quickly into some signage or some placemaking enhancements on the corridor. So this document just offers the ideas and a recommendation to have that additional effort.
Well, want to make sure I understand the implications of the vote. I've always viewed this area as the potential bohemian area of Alpharetta, which is, would fill a need that we don't have elsewhere, from high-end Avalon to traditional downtown. Be it Soho, Greenwich Village, whatever you want to call it, that appeals to a younger group, but to brand in that direction and to not be afraid of architecture and color in that direction that speaks to a younger audience in look and feel. But if it's not been decided. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, did you evaluate the accessory dwelling unit about if that is permitted, would it be permitted by right within Alpha Park? And the reason I ask is, will corporate investors come in and buy houses to double the rent for both the house and the ADU, which in my opinion would not be conducive to advancing the area? So have you evaluated that? Have you seen this in practice? Do you know what that looks like if you implement ADUs in Alpha Park?
Yeah, as part of this discussion, we did not quite get to that level of detail. We had some very good conversations with some of the residents, some of whom really liked the idea and some that had some similar reservations. I would not recommend that you do it by right. I would definitely do it by application, particularly as you're just getting started. And if it's a pilot program, as we suggested, I think it's something you're going to want to look at and tweak as you go. So we didn't get to that level of detail. We're certainly not suggesting that you do it by right.
Okay. Yeah, I would be, again, following this vote, interested in what those parameters look like, what the extent of council's discretion would look like without being discriminatory towards one applicant versus another, to be fair to all, yet at the same time not undermine our efforts in this area, because I would have concerns if you could buy one house as a rental, why not buy one house and put up an ADU and have two rentals?
Those are good points, and we would have to bring a code, a UDC code consideration for council to adopt in order to be able to, for somebody to request the ADU, even as a public hearing. So if you think about the North Point LCI, when we adopted the North Point LCI, from that, we then created a specific code for North Point and brought that to council and then adopted that into the code. So you'd have to get specifics on what that ADU allowance would look like.
Councilman Mitchell?
I would just like to, I think this is a genius template through which we can begin to think about that whole area, because it's probably the most difficult area that our city now faces, outside of the mall and North Point area and getting that, but that's well underway, so to speak. But this area needs the kind of guidance that this template provides. And I like Councilman Hype's referral as a bohemian area where you can experiment with color on these cottages and make it fun, make it something that small businesses can survive with. And yeah, I did say that. Even a red one maybe, but but where my biggest concern has been, as we grow as a city, what we do oftentimes without intent, but it happens just as business moves forward and rents go up. What you do is you evacuate all the bohemian kind of specialty shops and the artful shops and things like that have character and that draw people to a city. And so if we could somehow create an area that has cottages that are big enough to have a successful shop, unlike, I know they tried to do that on St. Simon's with the small little they were closet-sized shops, and it didn't work because you couldn't fit enough merchandise in there to make the rent, and then the rent grew, and those. But a cottage size, you can make a business work, and you can keep the rents down enough to create some interesting. And I think if we need one thing, it's that kind of district in our city. So I applaud all of you and the department for your efforts, and I can fully support this. I think it's a great look, and I agree wholeheartedly with the, I hope one day we can convince the Board of Education that there might be a lower rent area to store buses and let development take place in that mammoth area there. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Councilman Binder?
It's not even a comment in the form of a question. It's an actual question. But for Director Cook, going back to codifying, so especially the ADU, I liked what Councilmember Hype said about the ADU. I like the ideas of having it. We have a lot of families coming in with multi-generations, whether it's parents or kids coming back. But you don't want to make a double rent situation. When do you think you can come back for codifying a lot of this, or codifying maybe the ADU?
I think that probably the Alpha Park code will be the first focus that we have, because we did talk to so many different residents that lived in Alpha Park, and some of them had concerns about redevelopment. So we had decided, since there were so many different concerns and people, some wanted to put in some requirements for architecture and limiting the type of architecture size of homes, we're going to have a separate meeting with just Alpha Park residents to try to talk to them about what they would like to include as part of that code. So I would say, I think it probably would take us at least 90 days to put a draft together.
The lessons learned that we've had in a lot of our different areas surrounding downtown, I do want to be cognizant of making develop what we'd like to see, but also making it so it's achievable within our current owners and not having to make that a big push to let's redevelop that whole area. So a nice mix
Absolutely.
of both. So that's what I would like to see. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff on this item? Pete, I think you're back there somewhere. My only questions actually are for our Public Works Director. A couple of items that were brought up piqued my interest. But one, I believe in some of the previous conversations I've had with you about the Highway 9 project, I was under the impression that if we put vines on those walls, we had to pay for the maintenance on the walls.
So the front side, so Eric did Mr. Boston did a really creative thing on the back side of the walls. So the back side, they're on private property, not on city right away, and they grow up. So GDOT sees things a little differently from both sides. They would have to get permission from GDOT. They will work in some means, but what we have right now is they're would evaluate is the word I was used to receive this morning from District 7's office.
Okay. So I like the idea. That's a great creative solution,
didn't
as
tell
long
me
as
no.
we don't end up having to pay for those
Yeah.
walls.
The response from District 7 is, it is not a no, it is not a yes. So that's promising.
Well, we can always cut them down if there's a yes or a no. Okay, and the other one was I was intrigued by the Maxwell Road extension idea.
Okay.
Have you given some thought to that and whether that's actually something that's feasible, because it would have to be approved by GDOT, the Department of Transportation?
I have no thought about it,
Okay,
to be perfectly honest.
that's fine too.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see if you had.
No.
But I appreciate that
Okay.
and your candor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, everyone. So do we have any public comment cards on this item, Ms. Shapiro? We do not, Mr. Mayor. However, if anyone would like to come forward, speak on the LCI, now is your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, can I read the resolution?
No, you can't. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
I should have looked at my agenda. Please, Mr.
Mayor and council, this is a resolution by the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to adopt the South Main Street Livable Centers Initiative Study and incorporate into the Horizon 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you very much. Now would we be willing to make a motion?
Now I would be willing to make a motion. Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion tonight to approve and adopt PH-23-04, South Main Street Livable Centers Initiative, as presented this evening by Ms. Kathy and Kimberly Horn.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, a second by Councilman Mitchell. All those in favor of approving the motion for the PH-23-04 South Main Street LCI, as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you, everyone involved. So that'll wrap up the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move on to new business. First item under new business is the resolution for Fulton County to conduct the 2023 municipal general election. Ms. Shapiro?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this resolution before you this evening, just to give a little recap, in January, at the end of January this year, Council adopted a resolution to pursue the idea of appointing a municipal election superintendent for this year's election. And staff at that time, we researched and prepared what a forecasted budget might look like if the city were to conduct its own elections. During our last city council work session, mayor and council discussed their opinions as to which direction we should head with the upcoming election year. So tonight we're bringing forward this resolution for Fulton County to host its this year's election for your consideration. So if this resolution is approved tonight, this will be the first of a couple of items that we'll be bringing forward to you at a future date. The first item being a future ordinance, which is required by state law, which will basically just state that we've selected Fulton County to conduct our election, and then that they will serve as the election superintendent, performing all of the duties except for candidate qualifying, which the city clerk's office will handle locally. And then the second consideration would be an IGA with Fulton County that spells out the terms of how they are to facilitate this election. We received the final version from Fulton County on Friday after this agenda was published, so we could not add it to this agenda, but it is something that we plan to bring forward to you all on April 17th. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions from council? Councilman Will?
Perchance did the document they delivered to us Friday specify the 13 locations and the final cost?
So they did provide us with an invoice. However, as we somewhat discussed during our last work session, that number is really dictated on what our registered voter count is. So it could be quite possible that the number that they have projected with the 49,600 and I think 7 voters at this moment in time could increase, which we could also see a future increase in a second invoice that Fulton County may send us.
That's generally a nominal charge. I mean, it's a per.
It would be that per person number that the county has.
Did we get down to the 13 locations that the mayor's concerned about?
So in terms of the 13 locations, in the first draft of a memo that Fulton County issued to us on about January 10th, there was a consideration of 2 polling places potentially being combined, one of them being the Alpharetta Library and I believe it was Alpharetta Middle School, and them being combined into one polling location. So in determining polling locations, it appears as though Fulton County has almost a mathematical equation that they use. They take the city's number of registered voters and they aim to have about an average of how many people may show up at a centralized polling location. So say their targeted number is to have about maybe potentially 5,000 people visit a polling location, they'll determine the number of polling locations. So that likely won't be fully determined until we get closer until the election. So there, as of right now, what they've shown is one early voting location being the Alpharetta Library. The Milton Library will no longer be an early voting location since Milton is hosting its own elections this season. And then the 12 voting locations with the 2 merged together.
So you are saying more than likely we go from 13 to 12, but that's not concrete at this point.
Correct. And Fulton County, in determining how many polling locations, they use the overall registered voters, not necessarily maybe the 10 to 12,000 people that would vote in our municipal election. They look at if every single person comes to vote for our 4 open seats, they want to make sure that they have adequate staffing and locations for them to vote.
Well, then that begs the question, did they give you that formula so that we can make the determination, or are we still relying on subjective assumption?
That is correct, the subjective assumption. And some of that we'll just find out from the county as it gets closer. There are some state requirements in terms of notifying voters of their voting location and the timeline that has to be issued to the voter prior to the election. And they also have to communicate with the Secretary of State's office anytime that there's a change in a person's voting location. They have to go into a system that communicates with the Secretary of State's office that then prompts it to generate a voter identification card that then they receive and then they have to mail out to the voter. So if all works well, it should be hopefully about 60 to 90 days before the election, but that's not always guaranteed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Heights? Any other questions? I do have a question, and I probably should have asked this earlier in the process, but I've been working under the assumption this is the last time we'll be taking up this item. So, Ms. Tracy, my question for you is, will we have to approve the actual IGA itself?
Yes, the short answer is yes. We were hopeful that we would have the final IGA to bring to you all this evening, but as Ms. Shapiro said, we ran into some roadblocks there and did not get the final version until after this agenda was published. So I believe the current plan now is that the IGA would come back for your approval on the 17th of this month, because we are not having a meeting on the first Monday of April, and as well as I have to talk with Lauren about the ordinance, but because state law does require the city to adopt an ordinance to allow the county to conduct the election. We have to get that prepared and advertised and brought to you all as well.
And what was the deadline that the county had given us?
So the county had given a deadline of March 31st, and that's why we were trying to get in contact with the county for a finalized version of the IGA to take up at this council meeting. And I was finally successful in speaking with the county attorney's office on Friday, explained the situation, explained that this resolution would come forward that we're looking at tonight, expressing the intention of the city, if that is the vote tonight, to proceed with the county to conduct the election, and explaining to them that that was all we could really do to meet their self-imposed deadline. That's not a deadline that appears anywhere in state law, and they were okay with that.
Because they haven't provided us with the IGA?
Well, they provided it on Friday, which was too late to get it before you guys because of the advertising of the agenda.
Yeah. And that was why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Because I had to go back to the 2021 agreement and assume that it's, and not believe it is, very similar.
It is, and I think y'all have seen the draft agreement that was in your packet probably for the work session. It's substantially similar to that, just with the draft watermark removed, some little tweaks, specific terms filled in as it relates to the city, because that was sort of their draft agreement that they were sending to all of the North Fulton cities. So,
thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Just want to make sure I wasn't missing something here.
Yep, no.
No, they just didn't provide us much time to actually read the document that was supposed to approve by the end of the month. Councilman Bynum?
When did we approach them for the IGA?
So they sent the draft IGA with that memorandum sometime back in January, as Ms. Shapiro said. And of course, we got feedback from council last Monday at the work session. And we started asking them for the final version of the IGA at the beginning of, or after the last work session.
So we just went back to the negotiating table from last week, after you got the kind of what we were saying from the workshop, correct? From our
right,
direction.
and I wouldn't even say it was the negotiation table so much
Yeah.
as just, hey, we need a finalized version if we're going to put it before council and for us to have time to review it. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get that.
So, yeah, we started a week ago. Okay.
Councilman Mitchell?
Should we get the IGA and prior to looking at it, or if we're not in agreement with it, do we have any recourse through the Secretary of State's office? Or I know we can approach the county and our commissioners, but beyond that, what state allowable recourse do we have?
Well, not to be trite, but I think that the recourse would be that you would conduct your own election if you can't, come to terms with the county. State law says that, the county will do it based on an agreement. And if, my experience so far dealing with this is that we don't have a lot of leverage in terms of the bargaining of the dollar amount. As far as what other items you might want to see changed, I mean, I did speak with council for the county with the Fulton County Attorney's Office about some minor changes on the whereas clauses in the beginning that weren't accurate, and they were receptive to that. But as far as the substance, I think that this is an agreement that they're putting forward, not just to Alpharetta, but to the other cities who they were handling this for. So I don't want to overpromise that we could, deliver sweeping changes, particularly with the tight timeline that we're on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I could, just because I did review the draft that you had shared, and I went back and pulled the actual agreement from 21, is even if we sign the IGA, both parties have the opportunity to cancel it with 30 days notice without any reason given. And at one point in 2021, I remember, I was talking with Mayor Pro Tem about this earlier, our previous city clerk received a notice in July that the superintendent of Fulton County was not going to honor that agreement. And not just the city of Alpharetta, but all the cities in Fulton County were put in a position of, no, we're not going to provide it, even though we signed the IGA. And it was resolved, fortunately. But we would be able to withdraw if we were willing to run our own elections at that point. I'll also say, since you were asking about the costs, one of the things that concerns me about the IGA and why I was wanting to look at it if this was final approval is it still says in there that they're going to charge the full costs. So the projection they've shared with us is not the cost that we could be charged. It says that once the election's over, they'll know what the costs were, and they're going to divvy that up by population. So they haven't charged that in the past. They may not charge it again, but it's not a number that they're giving us that pay this and you're good. It says pay this, and then after the election, if we want to send you a bill, you have to pay it. Any other questions? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do, Mr. Mayor. The first speaker tonight is Mr. Burdell Jackson, if you would like to come forward.
Mr. Jackson, welcome back.
Good evening, gentlemen, staff. Thank you for the opportunity. Burdell Jackson, 1055 Chasewood Trail, Alpharetta in Windward. I come to the group to ask them to consider entering into the agreement. I have one request, that instead of one early voting place, we have two. So when you start to negotiate, ask for the additional place rather than just the library, because the library gets backed up during the early voting period. So that way, if you have one here and one on the west side of town or the east side of town, that would facilitate more access at that point in time. Since you haven't stipulated the specific number of polling places during the election, but at least have two early voting places to provide the tremendous number of citizens that we have. And secondly, by the time the folks vote early, that number that we're talking about that Fulton County is going to charge us is based on registered voters. So people will move in between now and early voting period. So that number is going to go up just by fact of the city growing. So I think we need to consider that too. But I urge you to approve the resolution to have Fulton County do it, because as I look through the agreement that they sent, part of the package here, there's a lot of work that has to be done that the staff already has, the county already has the critical mass of trained employees to do all the behind the scenes work that needs to be done. It's going to take Alpharetta quite a bit of time to ramp up to that level of efficiency and expertise. So again, I just ask for the additional early voting location as well as adoption of the resolution to enter into the agreement for Fulton County to run the election for the municipal election on November 7th. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any other public comment cards?
Yes. It looks like our next speaker is Dr. Kay Howard.
Mayor,
Ms. Howard?
Council, hey, staff. I would like for you to consider voting on this resolution in the positive and approving it. Right now, we're in a state where the Voting Rights Act has been diluted with respect to Shelby County versus Holder and Brennick, I think it's Brenovich versus Democratic National Committee. And we're in a state where this city could possibly be, if we were running our own election, I've spoken to the other five, I spoke with Johns Creek, and I didn't get a chance to speak with Roswell, but I know what their plans are to move forward with that, and I've been sitting in on everyone's city council, although I do live here. And what I'm concerned about is access to voting. So Mr. Jackson just mentioned, I'm in those long lines for early voting too. In fact, I've gotten here at 6 in the morning, and I didn't really like that, but I did that so I can vote early, but I want to make sure that if we move forward with this resolution, that we keep in mind when we're voting on it, that access could be a problem if you're running your own election, along with disenfranchisement, transparency, training, and all those things that come along with creating a new process. Since I'm a process improvement expert, I know that it also takes change management, and you need to inform your electorate that this is happening. So I would advise and hopefully promote that you vote yes on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any other comment cards?
Those are all the cards, Mr. Mayor.
However, if there is anyone else that would like to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I did not read this resolution either.
You have
I
not.
do not
Please
believe.
do. And then we can decide if we're going to pass the motion.
This is a resolution by the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to authorize the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections to conduct the city of Alpharetta's November 7, 2023 municipal general election, to authorize the city to enter into a contract with Fulton County for such purposes and for other purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. Now do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt a resolution to authorize Fulton County Board of Registrations and Elections to conduct the City of Alpharetta's November 7th, 2023 municipal general election, to authorize the city to enter into a contract with Fulton County for such purposes and for other purposes.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Will, a second by, I'll give it to Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? Councilman Will.
So for the benefit of people that are watching, and some of them have actually asked me this question, I just wanted to clarify that this was originally brought forward because Fulton County decided to more than double the charge to the city of Alpharetta to run our elections. So because of that, we made the decision to investigate the opportunity for us to do this ourselves. What we found in that investigation was currently, while they're planning on charging us $379,000, subject to what the mayor said, they are providing what is now 12 locations plus the early voting location for us to handle our election with. In our investigation of doing this, we were going to be limited to 3, maybe 4 locations for the same money. So for the city of Alpharetta to match what Fulton County was going to do would have been astronomically expensive. So even though they're charging us more, it made more financial sense, or it does make more financial sense in my opinion, to let them continue to run it, keep the 12 locations open, and let's go with the status quo for now. So that's the simple explanation for the people who have asked.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please raise your right hand. Next item up is the resolution to adopt the Alpha Loop Downtown Link. Director Cook. Ms. Tracy, if you don't mind going ahead and reading this ordinance, so I don't forget to ask for it later.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This is a resolution of the City Council of Alpharetta for the adoption of the Alpha Loop Downtown Link Plan and incorporation into the City of Alpharetta Horizon 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Short resolution. Mayor and Council, just a reminder, we had a workshop just a couple of weeks ago that went over the details, so I'm going to be brief with the overview, but of course, stop me if you have additional questions. Of course, the idea was to establish a clear and comprehensive vision for the downtown section of the Alpha Loop, and we wanted to make sure that we had something that was adopted as people come in to redevelop and there's changes in the downtown. We wanted to make sure that we could point to a document and say this is the preferred path, and we wanted to make sure that we incorporate that in any new development. We also established different design standards. Some of those design standards we're still working with Pete to make sure that in Public Works that they're comfortable with those standards. For instance, when you look through the document, there's a lot of green thermoplastic paint that will be used in certain areas to identify the location of the loop, so we need to make sure that we put something in place that he's comfortable with, and we're still having those ongoing conversations, but we wanted to make sure we adopt the general parts of this document. So looking at page 2, of course, just shows you in the dark orange the specific area that we're looking at, and the different intersections that we looked at are shown on page 7. So, of course, the goal was to make sure that we had something in place that we could go out and also possibly apply for different grants as part of these adopted improvements. So on page 7, we looked at Old Roswell Shared Street. That is something that's been shown in other downtown documents. We just wanted to carry it over and then designate that area as the preferred location for the Alpha Loop. We also looked at Roswell and Old Milton to determine the optimal crossing from the northeast corner of the intersection to the southwest corner. Roswell Roundabout, of course, we're going to have a lot of construction with the Roswell Roundabout and DeVore Road, so we want to make sure that that crossing is safe. And then one of the most important connections that we looked at was Kingery Lane. So I'll briefly show you some of those specific streets that we looked at. So page 8 shows the old Roswell Street, talks about the key considerations. And again, we took a document that was approved several years ago as part of a downtown plan and improvements, which showed Old Roswell Street being more of a complete street that's shared by bicycles, pedestrians, and cars. How do we accomplish that? Look at page, I think 11 shows it the best. That's the rendering that shows the concrete cobblestone. Of course, when tires hit that, pedestrians hit that, bicycles hit that, everybody's going to be slower. It's something that would create more of that shared street. And then the details for the old Roswell Street are on the next couple of pages, and it also shows that you could do this in sections. It doesn't all have to be completed at one time, so there are options. And then moving past Roswell Street, looking at page 14, that's the Roswell Street and Old Milton Parkway considerations. And when our consulting group looked at that crossing, they looked at the Wills Park master plan and make sure that we incorporated a crossing that would incorporate that master plan that's been adopted by the city. Page 15 shows the recommendations for how we can improve the access to Wills Park. Of course, taking the Alpha Loop over to Wills Park was an important consideration. And if you also look at Roswell Street on the north side of this rendering, that's a piece of property that hasn't been developed yet. We've had different developers looking at that, so we wanted to make sure we put in place what we're going to be looking for when that property is developed. The next couple of pages just show the specifics of Roswell Street and Old Milton Parkway. And then when it goes to page 17, that's specifically looking at Roswell Street and DeVore Road. And on page 17, it also shows the future roundabout. So with the roundabout that's going to be built, we wanted to make sure that there was a good connection over to Wills Park at that roundabout. A blow-up of that is on page 18, which shows improvements around the proposed roundabout. And you'll notice, just to orient you where you are on this one, on page 18, the blocks are the proposed townhomes. Actually, they're not townhomes, they're detached homes that you'll see along DeVore Road. So also with that developer that's applying for their land disturbance permit, we wanted to make sure that we incorporated a plan that's approved by council as part of their requirements. And then skipping to, page 19, of course, that's where the Quick Trip is located. So you'll see that there's some improvements shown on page 20. That also includes the green paint, just to designate that you're at a place, this is part of the Alpha Loop, and people will continue to follow that path. And then finally, Kingery. Kingery considerations start on page 22. And Kingery will connect the 1-mile Alpha Loop section that's already been developed from downtown to Avalon over to the new $15 million section that's under construction from Old Milton Parkway. And although there's different alternatives that were submitted as part of this study, our preferred alternative is on page 27, and it runs directly along the post office with the improvements crossing Old Milton Parkway and then connecting over to Chelsea Walk. And then the last few pages, it just has the different details and requirements of people, for developers that are using different paving methods, thermoplastic, as part of those required details. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Any questions for Director Cook? Councilman Binder.
You weren't here last week, right? You weren't here last week?
No, I wasn't, but I watched some of it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Cobblestone, is that going to be, what's the maintenance looking like on
Yes,
that?
so that was one thing that was very concerning for Pete as he was giving us comments. So he wants to make sure, like I said, we're still going through some of those details. And if you look, I think it's page, yeah. So it's page 38. Page 38 shows precast concrete brick pavers. We did have brick pavers throughout several sections, which has been changed to the precast concrete brick pavers. We're not showing real cobblestone. It's called cobblestone, but it's concrete cobbles. So again, as we work through some of these details, we'll have to make sure that
I
he's
saw the
comfortable.
concrete cobbles, does that mean it's stamped similar to stamped brick, or is it,
There's-
are those each individual
These are
pieces?
still individuals, but it's concrete. I don't know if you recall when we required an actual cobblestone crossing in front of Teasley Place. We had so many complaints about the noise
Yeah.
that we replaced that to where it wasn't real cobblestone, it was actually concrete.
So after going through a couple of these with you, I try to learn my lessons. I'm out the door almost. When we approve these plans, then when you come back for budgeted and it's cobblestone, it's like, well, you approved it. So if I'm approving this today, is there a way to notate that we really still want to look at the finishing touches and
Absolutely.
balance out the dollars of maintenance versus how much we have, and knowing that we also have North Point and all those items? Because I do love the look of it. I love
Right.
the pedestrian safety, what you did on Roswell Street there. But I don't want to make sure that's a stamped approval of
Understood.
the icing.
And we're still going back and forth of looking at, different paving, green thermoplastic options, and we will continue to look at other options. If we applied for a grant and we actually went through construction documents, there may be a new product that is better than an existing product that we have. So we're always going to be open to making sure.
I mean, I don't know, this has been here since the Romans, the cobblestone.
Well, that's true, and we're already using, fake cobblestone. And I think it also, you could possibly have redevelopment in areas where then you require as part of that the construction of some of these sections as well as the maintenance.
No, I do think it's a good plan. I just want the finishing touches. I want to make sure.
Understood.
On record.
Yes.
All right.
Any other questions for Director Cook? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We have already read this one, have we not?
You are
Just checking.
correct.
Do we have any public comment cards, Ms. Shapiro? No, Mr. Mayor. However, if you'd like to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to adopt the resolution of the Alpha Loop downtown link as presented this evening by Ms. Cook.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and a second by Councilman Binder, and that was to approve the resolution and the adoption of the Alpha Loop downtown link as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? Thank you for your progress. We appreciate your creativity. We count on Pete to make it affordable and maintenance free. That being said, all those in favor of approving, please raise your right hand. And it is unanimous. Thank you. Next item up is the RFP 22-115 Public Safety CAD/RMS System. Director Robinson, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Thank you. We are requesting council approval to award Hexagon Corporation for our CAD RMS system based on RFP 22-115. As you see there, your packet, the total cost for implementation is $2,449,290, and then also in your packet you'll see the next 10 years regarding costs each year. So just a little background of what got us here. This process has been going on for a couple of years, and this process was initiated due to multiple factors. We were notified by our current vendor that no future enhancements would be forthcoming, and that beyond what the state mandates and requires, and there would also be decreased support moving forward and attention to service requests, and also we were having an increased difficulty for our officers to provide accurate national incident-based reporting system incident reports due to current mobile and server-based software limitations. So the current item that we have in place, system we have in place, has been since 2007, and it needs to be replaced to meet new reporting standards, increase data analytics, and improve intelligent capabilities. So after the RFP process, and I won't go through all the details of that, you see that we came down to one clear choice, and that was Hexagon. And we feel strongly that this is indeed the best vendor to move forward with. In addition to the response to the best and final offer, Hexagon offered to reduce $50,000 in implementation fees and a combined discount of $150,000 over the balance of the 10-year term, which resulted in a total project cost reduction of $200,000. Now, if I may, I would like to share with you why, beyond the RFP process, I feel very strongly tonight before you that we are very confident in the choice for Hexagon moving forward for CAD and RMS, which of course is very crucial to our operations in 911 and policing. First of all, one of the key components of Hexagon versus our current vendor and other vendors is they are 100% cloud-based. Of course, this aligns with the city's goal of becoming completely cloud-based as well. Let me give you some benefits of that for us moving forward. Currently, right now, our officers have to come back to headquarters to complete reports on RMS. With Hexagon, they would be able to handle all reports in their patrol cars, and that means they can remain in the field, which is a huge opportunity for them to stay out, visible, and be a deterrent while they're doing their reports. Also, this software will allow them the opportunities to attach photos, statements, affidavits, things like that in the report they cannot currently do right now. So again, officers right now have to come back to headquarters to do reports. And so with Hexagon and the 100% cloud-based system that they offer moving forward, that would allow them to stay in their patrol cars, in their vehicles, in their zones, which of course increases their ability to be a deterrent while they're out there. Another benefit of the 100% cloud-based system is that currently right now with our current vendor, every other Tuesday, our CAD RMS has to be shut down for 3.5 hours. So that's 7 hours a month it has to be shut down for maintenance. And so during those 7 hours, we basically have to go old school with pencil and paper when our officers and our 911 dispatchers do their job. With this new implementation of Hexagon and their cloud-based technology, that would go away. And by the way, that 7 hours is the minimum. So we know at least twice a month for 3.5 hours that system's going to be down, which can be detrimental to our operations. Currently, when detectives are called in to major crime scenes, as they often are, they have no access to real-time information or intelligence. And so with Hexagon, again, in this 100% cloud-based system, this would greatly reduce the turnaround time for them. It would allow them immediate access to ongoing information and intelligence, which would help expedite the initial stages of their investigations. And as you know, those first few hours in an investigation are crucial. And so that gives them a quicker opportunity to get to work even before they're on the road heading into the city and heading into the call to get a much more expedited approach to the process of their investigations. Finally, with the cloud-based system, we can dispatch from anywhere in the city. Think about what we've seen in the last week with these tornadoes, right? So imagine, God forbid, that happening at our headquarters. Now, fortunately, we have backups with Roswell and other agencies around us, but ultimately, with the Hexagon product and the 100% cloud-based system, we literally can dispatch from anywhere at any time with a laptop and Wi-Fi. And so we're thinking about already preparing for Taste of Alpharetta. We could literally set up a mini dispatch center right there in our operations center while we were conducting operations for that night. So those are all some of the advantages that come along with Hexagon that would allow us opportunities to be much more efficient in what we're doing and allow us just simply to do our job better. Let me add a few other things about Hexagon versus our current vendor and other vendors that participated in the RFP process. As you all know, we take great pride. Our 911 center was the first next-gen 911 center. And we still think we're the only one in Georgia that we know of, right? The current capabilities that we have cannot be fully met right now as we stand. For instance, a good example of that, let's say a victim of a crime wants to send pictures or video. That's one of the advantages to next-gen 911. They cannot do that with our current platform. Hexagon would allow the opportunity to be able to do that, which again, you can imagine how that creates a much more efficient response to being able to having victims or witnesses of crimes immediately send us valuable video, data, pictures, things like that. So we have this great program, and we're not able to fully utilize it with our current vendor, but with Hexagon moving forward, we will be able to utilize all of the capabilities that come along with that. Hexagon also will make it much easier for us to share data with surrounding agencies. As you know, this is more important now than ever that we work well with our partners, not just our neighbors, but throughout the metro area, and sharing data and sharing intel. As real crimes are even happening, if something, let's say there's a group of entering autos going on tonight in Sandy Springs, and that real-time intel and data getting moved up our way can help us prepare and hopefully get in front of something like that. And so Hexagon excels in that area of being able to share that data efficiently, quickly, and accurately. Our current vendor is on an older system written on older technology. Conversely, Hexagon offers the ability to extract data and utilize in a variety of ways to include evidence-based and intelligent-based decision-making, crime reduction strategies, and operational improvement strategies. Let me translate that. Basically, it's going to allow us to be more effective proactively in our policing as well as investigating and following up on crimes. Hexagon offers a technology that will help enhance our intelligent-led policing. You've been hearing me talk about that for 6 years now. Intelligent-led policing and database strategies through our real-time crime center. Again, something you've been hearing a lot about recently, and this is a crucial time for us to be able to take the technology that Hexagon offers and utilize that as we try to roll out our real-time crime center. I feel very confident, no promises, but I feel very confident this would be a major tool in our toolbox and would help us reduce what is already a very low crime rate here in Alpharetta. One other thing I want to mention, and then I'll wrap it up, another reason why we feel very strongly about moving forward with Hexagon versus our current vendor. Since 2021, we have had to make 140 calls for support. Okay, that is an average of 1 call for support every 5.8 days. And the average from beginning to end closure time of each of those calls is 66 days. 66 days, and some lasting up to 6 months. We cannot operate effectively or efficiently in that type of environment. So let me finish with this. Our citizens, as you know, have a high expectation of service from police and 911, and well, they should. And our team has done a phenomenal job of creating that expectation because they do such a good job. We have a high standard for ourselves as well in everything that we do, and especially in the area of technology. However, I can tell you we don't feel like we're currently able to meet even our own standard when it comes to utilizing technology to effectively serve our community and our businesses and our visitors. And I feel confident that this RFP process clearly identified the CAD RMS vendor that will help us meet not only the community's expectations, but our expectations moving forward. Be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, sir. Any questions? Councilman Mitchell, then Councilman Will.
Director Robinson, you have a contract with the current one, right? That's renewable annually?
Is it renewable annually? I don't know. Is it renewable? It is? Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is renewable annually, yes. Okay.
And would you say, because of all the customer service issues that they've had, they've fired themselves?
I would say that, again, as some of the things I've shared with you, is twofold. Number one, we feel like Hexagon is a superior product, but number two, we have had several frustrations over the years, and I just gave you back to 2021 of customer service related issues where we feel like we're not able to utilize the technology that should be available to us, again, to serve our citizens. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And with your permission, I'd like to ask Interim Director Montgomery to come forward, and I want to question him on some. He shared some stuff with me this morning about the technical aspects of the research that the committee did. Would you share what you talked about with Hexagon and specifically the technical aspect of how they are able to integrate systems not only now but in the future?
Yeah, I think the biggest point that I think Chief was making is that, from my perspective, is we've got a 15-year-old system. And so besides the support issues, which are certainly significant and real, the current system is written on technology that's 15 years old. And we've seen the majority of it, while they have done functional updates, it's still written in that core age. And so as we move forward and as we talk about real-time crime center and crime analysis and what they're trying to do over there, this new system will allow them to do a lot more of that and be able to pull the data out. That's one of the biggest issues we're seeing across the city as a whole, is being able to pull all this data out of the systems today. Does that talk a little bit about?
And then you had mentioned something about our current provider has switched ownerships, but yet nothing has been
The current product 15 years ago was a company called OSSI. I think we're now on the 4th owner of this product, which is Central Square. Yeah.
And they've not updated the product?
Again, they've done updates just simply to the things that are required by law, but there aren't any updates in terms of functionality, that anything in comparison to what we would get with Hexagon.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Will.
I'm going to also ask a question to Chris Lagerbloom, our city manager. So one of the challenges I had, not a challenge, but I just wanted to make sure that when I was going through my due diligence on this, that I didn't just hear from the Public Safety Department. I actually asked Mr. Lagerbloom to do his own research into our current vendor as it related to other cities and what their experience was. And I would ask you to maybe elaborate without mentioning any cities in specific, but what did you find out in your investigation?
Sure. Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to, because as the chief will tell you, I've been pretty hard on this selection moving forward. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to trust but verify. And so I did have the opportunity to speak with an implementing agency last week, people that were overseeing the implementation of a new Central Square project, and the comments that I got were consistent with those that the Public Safety Department had got with respect to the customer service. And it was characterized as, every time we need to get something done, we have to fight to get it done. And that's just not something that in this type of software we can tolerate. And the other thing that highlighted in my conversation was the fact that as this implementation has been going on, that there's been this issue that has been unresolved with the system just turning off, just going down. And sometimes they said it would go 5 days before having an issue, and then all of a sudden they'd have 2 issues in a day. And whereas that on its face may not seem important, each reboot took at least 35 to 40 seconds. So for those 35 to 40 seconds, unexpectedly, the system would not be available. So I heard enough concern and enough valid concern to report back that I really think what is, as far as a recommendation, and we haven't gotten there yet, but what is before us is either to move forward as the chief has indicated, or to say we need to start this process over. I don't think the recommendation will be to consider recommending an award to the number 2 firm.
And when we did the original RFP, we had 7 different companies, is that correct?
7, I know it was more than...
Initially 7. And then down to 3 through the process.
So starting the process over, we're going to get the same 7 companies, the same 7 prices,
There's
basically.
a very good chance.
We're not going to get anywhere with that. Okay, all right, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Councilman Hypes.
Well, like many of my fellow council members, I saw the number and gulped a little bit. Sure. It's a big number, but obviously our Public Safety Department has served Alpharetta extremely well over the years. Yeah, the question I've been leaning into and was exploring this afternoon is when we budget an item like this, which if you amortize it, extrapolate it, whatever the correct term would be over the 10-year period, it's an $800,000 a year item.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an $800,000 a year item that will also, by our vote, obligate future administrations, future councils. It'll be on their books, whatever we vote for.
Mm-hmm.
How does this change our crime statistics? I've got the crime stats up from city data right here in front of me. We have very low crime statistics. You do a great job. Our department does a great job. The one murder in 2019 was one too many, but we're, compared to other jurisdictions, we should consider ourselves fortunate that our crime stats are so low. What does $800,000 do for us per year, or $2.45 million up front, to better our crime statistics? Because at the end of the day, I'm curious, when we spend this money, how do we improve ourselves?
Sure. That's a valid question, and I appreciate your words, and I'll be quick to say that it's our team. It's not me. It's definitely our team that keeps those crime stats low, and we're very blessed. Again, I can't stand up here and guarantee you a drop in, to your point, we already have a very low crime rate, and we are proud of that, and we always work to make that lower. We feel like we are just scratching the surface when it comes to technology. And as I've shared with you many times with some of our other technological initiatives, we feel like technology helps. It's a multiplication of resources for us. And so ultimately, this technology combined with, and again, we believe we need this as a foundation for what we want to do moving forward with the Real-Time Crime Center, with intelligent-led policing, taking that to a next level. If we do those things effectively like I know we can, I know that we will greatly increase our chances of reducing crime in Alpharetta. And that is saying something, because to your point, our crime rate is very, very low. So I believe fully standing here before you, again, making no guarantees, but I believe that this is going to help enhance our opportunity to be more proactive, to be more effective utilizing technology, to be more reactive when it comes to solving crimes, whether it's entering autos or that one homicide or whatever in between. I stand before you feeling very confident that this is the tool that will help us utilize several other tools moving forward in the future, starting hopefully as soon as this summer with the Real-Time Crime Center rolling out, to reduce our low level of crime even more.
And I'll offer the question for you to answer however you interpret this, but at what point is so much money allocated that the diminished returns are not worth the cost? We have Flock, we have LPR, we have Fuses, we're talking Real-Time Crime Center, we've got a $2.5 million with $500,000 carrying costs for this CAD RMS. At what point do we go from, we've got that one car break-in and we got to stop that one car break-in, as opposed to the amount of money that we are investing to stop that one car break-in?
I think I look at it a little bit differently. Number one, I guess that point would be when we have no more crime, which is not probably going to happen. But I look at it, Councilman Hypes, as we are trying to stay ahead of the game. And we continue to see what's happening in metro area. We continue to see what's happening in outliers of the metro area. Thankfully, again, we've been very fortunate up here because of the work of our phenomenal team to help keep crime at a very low rate. I don't think we can ever stop trying to get better and making sure that we are deterring crime. I think as soon as we let our foot off the gas, that's when we open up the door to crime becoming more of an issue. And so my answer to that question is never. I understand we have to be fiscally responsible, and I'm 100% in support of that. We don't want to just, waste money on technology and try new things unless we believe in that firmly. I don't come before you, especially with a major price tag like this, without believing wholeheartedly this is the right choice for us moving forward. So ultimately, my answer to that question is I don't know that we would ever reach that point as long as we are being smart and intentional in how we approach, how we utilize technology, how we utilize our resources. But again, I will say that any time that we ever let our foot off the gas on that, that's when we open ourselves up, I'm afraid, to seeing an increase in crime. And as far as I'm concerned in my role, I don't ever want to stop making sure that a phrase we like to use in our department is make it better, make it better. And as long as we continue to make it better, I think we'll be able to keep our crime at a very low rate. As soon as we stop doing that, I'm concerned it's going to change things in Alpharetta for the negative.
I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Councilman Binder.
Chief, as part of the backstory, this was an approved item in the current year budget, right?
Yes,
that
sir,
we
correct.
approved in July.
Yes.
And it's right in line during this inflationary environment. It's pretty in line with what you were saying in June.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct. We did have a slight increase, and if you look
Yeah.
in your packet there, you'll see that we utilized some 911 funds to help kind of bridge that gap. But yes, it was a budgeted item.
Pretty
that was
lucky in
approved.
this day and age of what we're all seeing at the
Very fortunate.
for
Yes, sir.
prices of things. And I appreciate the work you did with the procurement process on that. And I would like to say it's good to see you up and really advocating for this. And that I love it when staff does that, and it gives me confidence and saying that I have confidence in you. So
thank you.
I thank you for all the work you've done on it and keeping it in line with the budget and being part of that budget planning process that I'm always harping on you on. So I'm happy to see where you are today on this.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Director, I'm not sure whether it's better to ask this of you or Director Harris, but my thought is that this isn't a net cost, this is the cost, and we're currently having to pay something for the existing system.
Right.
So which one of you might be better prepared to kind of let us know what the net cost is compared to what would be
know if I
paying,
have-
even if we were to put a Band-Aid on the system we have and try to use that?
Do you have that?
$200,000 a year for maintenance? Okay, so we've already spent all the capital on that?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's what I was saying. And we amortize that over how many years?
We bought the system in 2007, so I don't, yeah.
2007, so we've gotten 16 years of use out of that capital investment. Okay, I just wanted to kind of frame that in my mind, because I'm assuming that we may not get 16 years out of the new system, but it's not going to be in 1 year expense. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item? However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance. You may have seen. Please state your name and your address.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm with the incumbent that fired itself, apparently. I'm Barry Meddens, the General Counsel and Company Secretary for Central Square, and I also sent you the letter that you received earlier today from our Chief Product Officer. I heard the Chief's comments, and I'm not going to stand up here and try to convince you otherwise. It's obviously clear in his mind where he wants to take this decision. And from my perspective, we're obviously disappointed we're at this point because we've been obviously a great partner. You've been a great partner of ours, a great customer of ours for many, many years. The product that is currently in use is old. Can't disagree with anything the Chief just said. Can't disagree with any of the comments made by your IT group about it. We made the decision recently to change the product because we have hundreds of customers who are in the same position asking us, why aren't you investing in it? Why aren't you moving it to the cloud? Which we are doing. Having said that, and I certainly hope that you would reconsider your decision or the recommendation by the department, but if you do not, and if you choose to proceed with this RFP, awarding it to Hexagon, I just want you to know that we at Central Square will be here to help. A transition between one vendor and another is not an easy thing to do, and we'll be here to support that in any way, and if it doesn't work out with Hexagon, we'll be here. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to award RFP 22-115 to Hexagon Corporation for the CAD RMS system and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Will, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Hypes.
As I was alluding to when discussing with Director Robinson, Alpharetta does a phenomenal job with our public safety, and I can only commend our public safety department for what they do for the citizens of our great city. The statistics are a metric that we can look to, and we have low crime statistics. And what I want to say is, when public safety comes to council, I, for one, will always look at it from the vantage point is it's something that we need that will continue to enable them to do their job and to maintain those low crime statistics. With the approval of all the technology that has been brought forward over the last 3 or 4 years, flock cameras, LPRs, fuses, etc., that should and will undoubtedly free up a lot of manpower resources for policing on the street, people on the beat downtown, because they won't be writing tickets, people hitting areas that are known to be prone for car break-ins, such as over at Mansell and 400. And Director Robinson has always steered us in the right direction in that regard, and I think he understands, and I want him to hear that when these things are brought forward, we hear what you're saying, but there is also that element of fiscal responsibility when we've reached the point where there's like no return on the additional expenditure for technology. He's told us that we need this, and I accept that, and I will support this. But in casting my vote in support of this, I want the residents to know that I'm still being very mindful that this is a very large budgetary item that will be carried year to year, and that it's being, my vote will be cast very thoughtfully in favor of this in light of that budget impact.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Been doing this for a little while. It's a given, patrol cars don't last forever. Firearms, other equipment gets replaced, even flashlights get upgraded. Those are all easy things to do. But as Councilman Hypes just mentioned, when it's a big dollar ticket item like this, and it's not going to put a shiny red fire truck on the street, or new cars for the police department, or whatever the new state-of-the-art on the street stuff is, but this is needed as a foundation. As Chief Robinson said, this is the foundation of how these guys operate. It's not a fun thing to spend money on. I think about it like putting a new roof on your house. Nobody wants to do that. But the reality is it's got to be done. And at some point, with 16-year-old technology, appreciate the attorney coming this evening, presenting his case. It's time. I don't think another year with a Band-Aid to see what else pops up is what this city needs. So I, too, will strongly support this.
Any other discussion? Councilman Will.
I think everybody who's watched City Council knows that I'm a gigantic advocate for public safety. I'm the public safety liaison, and I got to tell you, when I first saw this budget item, I asked to be pulled off an agenda a couple weeks ago because the amount of money staggered me, and I wasn't willing to support it at that time. But I requested that public safety go back through the process, renegotiate the contract. I asked our city manager to get involved. I asked him to go do his due diligence. I wanted to make sure for a fact that this was the best option before I was going to agree to it, because I was initially against it. And after everything that they did, I've come to the conclusion that this is the best option for us moving forward. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
Any other comments? That being said, the motion was to approve 22-115 Public Safety CAD RMS system. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to the workshop item. And workshop item is the replacement of council chambers video wall displays. Mr. Montgomery, welcome to the torture chamber.
Good evening. Our favorite topic. So what we are, hopefully all of you had an opportunity to read the report that was provided in the packet after a number of discussions, both in council, I think in early January, at the retreat, and then in just one-on-one sort of discussions. The staff came to a conclusion of sort of 4 options that we wanted to look through. Those are detailed out in the report itself. I think since this is a workshop, what I would like to sort of say tonight is, first, we are running out of time to do a change order, which is what option 1 is. The room is almost finished over there. All the equipment has been installed. And so, that's all right. All the equipment is installed. So I think if it's not option 1, if we don't want to do the change order through One Diversified, then we go into another option, and what the numbers that have been presented in the report here are estimates of what we think this will be. We would then take what we hear tonight and go back and have to work on a funding model along with what the best option would be going forward. So just to sort of set what we're hoping to get out of tonight, if that's all right. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think the thing to highlight too is, just so that you're aware what Adam's talking about when he talks about change order and we're running out of time. Yeah. You wouldn't see a change order to the work that's being done over there and the full value amount of what these monitors cost. What you would see is a number much less than that, because of the fact that what we had initially proposed was to prepay for annual maintenance for a period of 5 years. If we just pay the first year of annual maintenance and decide that this is an important thing to get done in the room, the change order amounts to about $6,000 or $7,000. So it's not really a significant. You're not going to see a $67,000 change item. If what this council wants to do is simply to move away from a hung monitor and go with more of a commercially available, not to call out a vendor, but just to highlight it by reference, go to a Best Buy, for example, and buy a couple of TVs and mount them on the wall, we can do that. We believe they would be supported, meaning I believe that they would broadcast, and we would just have some additional carpentry work to do in the council chambers because we can't quite match the size. And the monitors that are over there now really fill the space. And so if we go down by 10 inches, we're going to have some cosmetic work to do behind them. And, you know, our estimates for both of them are, yes, the monitors are more, but the estimate for just a more commercially available display is in fact less. So if we're looking to do it at the least cost, then the council giving us direction to go do that would be one thing we could do, or the monitors. The good news is we believe both work. So, you know, we're not giving you an option and say, if you want it to work, pick this one, and if you maybe want it to work, pick this one. We do both. We think they'll both work.
I think options 1 and 2 are the 2 that we had originally sort of proposed in the original packet. This afternoon, a question came up around doing another quad display, which is something we had looked at in option 4. So I printed off an updated form that hopefully is on the desk there for you that takes into account this is not an option that I think fits with what our goal is, but it is an option out there to look at in terms of costs. To clarify a little bit, I think what Mr. Lagerman was saying is we think that the annual support and monitoring, there's a monitoring service that's really important as part of this. We were prepaying 5 years at, I think, a 15% discount as part of the original contract. And so we would take that down to 1 year, and then we would renew as part of our operating every year after that. We haven't gotten an official number yet because we're waiting to see what the direction we're going. We're estimating that around $20,000 a year in the operating budget going forward as a result of taking this out and doing the displays instead. I'm happy to go through all the options in detail. However, you would like to just questions or
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah. Adam, you looking at the price comparisons of the options.
Yes, sir.
You're at almost this is almost at $5,000 a year in support of those two. What do you get for support?
So that is extension of the actual warranty for the device itself, along with the monitoring service. If we go through One Diversified will be, we'll have them in so they can actually monitor all of the equipment. If something's predictively going wrong, they can see that. If there's something happening in the meeting right now, we don't really have any way of calling someone and doing anything with that. They will actually be available on a call should something happen in the immediate moment.
But
all of that is part of any ongoing costs around associated with any setup issues, or if there
That's
are any
just the
sort of
TV,
troubleshooting.
that's just the monitors.
That's just the displays.
If the monitor goes out, we're still going to have a meeting, it's going to work, it's going to record, the audience may not see it.
Correct.
So for $4,700 a month,
No, that's a year. The
Even on
$47.84 is a yearly support cost.
versus what do they charge an hour to come out and work on something?
Ah, that's a good question. I don't know their monthly,
I'm just
their
trying to say, if I'm
annually
spending
rate.
$4,700,
Yeah.
up until year 8, we didn't have any problems with these until the 8th year.
Correct.
And this is supposed to be a better product anyway, so there's $40,000 we would have spent in theory.
In theory.
For support that we could have.
And warranty.
I'm in the
and
insurance
monitoring.
business, I don't believe in warranties.
Okay.
Side note, joke. All right, you answer the question. Thanks.
Councilman Will?
All right, so here's my challenge with all these numbers. And it begins in the last meeting when the contractor was here. And if you all remember, he clearly said, when we come to do this, we give you the absolute highest price item that we have available, and then we determine if it's in your budget and we work your way down. I have a real problem with that. And I think part of that statement, when I look at the quads as an example, which I know we don't like them, but they're charging us $5,000 a TV. For a 55-inch TV I can buy for $179, right? I know we don't want to do that one, but it's an example of what I'm talking about. When we go to these 100-inch TVs, I can buy these for $2,000 to $10,000 tops, and yet we're paying $15,000 for them, plus another $10,000 in materials and $10,000 to hang them. That is astronomically high in my opinion. I have a real struggle with that. So
I think to maybe address some of the installation is the issue we're going to run into is these are 15 feet in the air. And so not anyone, they're 200 pounds, not anyone can lift those and put those in correctly. And so that's part of why I think the installation cost is so much, is it's a specialized work.
Yeah, I still have a huge problem with that. It's going to take them an
Okay.
afternoon for $10,000 of labor. So the cost of the TVs are too high, the cost of the installation's too high. Everything about this is too high for me, and there's just no way I could vote for it. And again, a vendor that tells me he's going to bring me the most expensive item because he has the highest markup on that, and he knows where government will pay for it. I don't like that.
Well, Councilman Will, since this is a workshop and we're just trying to get some clarity here, you can't support number 1 is what you're saying. Well, they're not presenting it. What I'm trying to say is you've made it clear what you don't support. I'm asking you what it is you will support.
Yes.
Because we're trying to get to an answer here one way or another tonight.
So
We've got 2 options that are being presented. So you're saying you won't support either one of them. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Councilman Heights.
My questions are, for option 1, it says 1 year renewable. How often can it be renewed? The warranty.
Well, we are choosing to do 1 year because we initially would do, well, let's say no. For the displays, we just asked for a 1 year warranty initially, and we would renew annually.
So we can renew annually?
Absolutely, yes.
And that's the warranty?
Correct.
Okay. Now, it says for option 2, 1 year voided in commercial space. So do we have 1 year or do we have no warranty?
There's a 1 year warranty on it. If, let's say, an example, we had Best Buy for Business come out and Geek Squad came out and they were comfortable enough installing something in this space, they're going to know it's going into a commercial space. For a consumer grade television, not a display, that typically voids a warranty. In almost all the contracts that I've read online on this, you put a consumer TV in a commercial space, you void the warranty.
You're giving great explanation. I want to know if there's a warranty on option 2. It says no warranty for commercial space.
There's no warranty in our space.
Okay, so the
Now,
one.
we could try and file a claim, but
so
yes, there's no
we
warranty.
can strike through 1 year. There's no 1 year.
That's correct.
Okay.
My point there is I was listing sort of the statistics of each of those, and it comes with a 1 year that I think would be voided for us.
All right. So in your opinion, there's no warranty on option 2. There's 1 year. It's renewable on option 1. My next question is, when you come into City Hall, walk by the windows out there, the city logo is up there on a static image. It's highly susceptible to burn-in. if, for the one that has a warranty, which is option one, does it warranty against burn-in, image retention?
Yeah, and it's also an IPS display. So,
again, I'm going to ask you,
Yeah.
does it warrant, if you know, and if you don't know, that's fine.
I
But if
can't recall if it specifically mentions burn-ins. I know the commercial grade displays, not televisions, have a lot of burn-in protections in them because they're
Right.
used to a static image.
Right.
But
So the screens will be ruined if they're burned in.
Sure.
And I would like to know, since there's no warranty on option two, and
We will find
and, consumer TVs are susceptible to burn-in, is the one that we would be paying extra for that will have a static image
Yeah.
much of the day.
So unlike today where the screens, or previously where the screens had to be left on because of the nature of the system, we couldn't get it to restart. So we had to leave the screens on all the time because the system was so old. We plan for these things to be off when they're not in use.
All right.
Yeah.
I still want to know.
Understood. We will find out the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you. The only other thing I think that has not been covered is we had talked about the commercial television and it's only 100 inches versus, 110
inch.
And the need to have some carpentry work done, which Pete, I believe, estimated at 10,000.
That's what's on here, yes.
I think that's high, but, but I understand you want to get somebody who's.
So just so everybody sort of understands what's happening there, the
Right.
screens are up there, there's a box behind them.
Right.
And we lose 10 inches at 100, going down to 100, you run the potential that you're now going to start to see some of that box and the framework behind it.
Okay. We've been discussing this and the audio for 10 years, or not 10 years. We really have been discussing the audio for 10 years because we took the old system out of City Hall. We never got the proper system put in here. That's why I'm in favor of one and moving forward with it and doing it the right way like we did everything else except for the roof with the City Hall. And another thing, thanks for taking all the crap with the lighting and the water drainage. And I heard it went all over you, so thank you for your volunteering for that. Thank you.
Yes, wrap this up.
In the
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this too myself multiple times. At the end of the day, the proper fit in my mind is option one. Let's see if there's any room in any of these numbers still. I don't know if you contacted them today or not to see if this is their final answer.
I did not today. The quote was, I think, a week or two old, so that's the latest as of a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
But I will reach out again.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way as Councilman Donald Mitchell.
Any comments?
I gave all my questions to James. He's looking at them right now.
Okay. So I understand that cost is a big factor in these things, but I think the number is low enough now that it's what the people in the city see us on. And so the people that actually come to these meetings, and can they see the little diagrams that Kathy Cook puts up and things like that? So, I mean, the quad was out of this. Once somebody told me that it makes the crosshairs on my face every time, no, I can't support the quad. But I do think that the experience is worth something, and our residents deserve to have something that's acceptable. I'm not sure that the commercial is really all that acceptable in different lighting and things like that. So I'm fine with number one at this point. Any other?
If it was unclear, I'm leaning into option one.
Okay.
But I would like us to also do the best we can with warranty covering damage.
We'll ask that specific question when we reach out for a new quote.
Do y'all have what you need?
We have
Mr.
the direction
Liverpool?
we need, yes, thank you.
I think so.
You're welcome. So that'll wrap up the workshop. Is anyone here that would like to come forward for public comment? Do we have any reports?
Yeah, I have a report.
So close. Councilman Ives, please share your report.
Farmers Market opens this Saturday, April 1.
Woohoo! So unless there's any other reports, I do not believe we need an executive session this evening, so this meeting is adjourned.